And thanks so much for inviting me. And um, hello, everybody out there at Carnegie Mellon Energy Week. It's a little weird because we're not all together, and I certainly am ready to kind of get back to semi-normal and do things face to face. But I'm actually really thrilled to be able to be here with you all today. So hopefully next year, that's what we're going to be able to do. As you heard, my name is Paula Glover. I am the president of the Alliance to Save Energy. We are a DC-based nonprofit that focuses primarily on federal energy policy. But today, I really want to talk with you about why I'm so passionate, not only about energy efficiency and its solutions, and that is because I'm passionate about this topic of energy justice. And energy justice is a buzzword that we've been hearing a lot, probably over the last several months. And so I'm super excited that people are talking about it. But sometimes I think we use that word interchangeably with energy burden, energy insecurity, and we don't have a lot of clarity about what it means when we say energy justice. And more importantly, how can we actually achieve energy justice? So today, what I'm going to do is hopefully help you walk away with a clear idea of what energy justice is, what it looks like, and as how our energy systems change, how we move to a cleaner energy future, what role can we all play in ensuring that it is just and equitable? And so when we get to the slides, I'm going to ask you to move on. Are we good? Do we have the slides up, Anna?
Just
okay, that's fine. Just next slide when you're ready.
There we go.
And I'll start.
There you go.
So why now? Why are we talking about energy justice so importantly now? Many of you know that it was a little bit more than a year ago when things changed considerably and the world seemed to stop in place. And many of you may recall that sometime in April, as we started to get the first bit of data out about how COVID was impacting communities around the country, we heard about the disparate impact that it was having on Black and Brown communities. And that what we learned as we move forward through that year is that Black and Brown communities are disparately impacted by a lot of things in this country. It is just inequitable. So we start with COVID and shutdown in March, and we're moving through April and May, and then 8 minutes and 46 seconds changed everything. For those of you who don't know the reference about 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that is the amount of time on the video that we watched George Floyd call for his mother as he lost his life. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And there was more than just a small wave of protests and outrage as a result of his murder. But in that moment, unfortunately, in that moment, what did happen was a much larger conversation about justice in this country and inequity, particularly as it relates to Black and Brown people. And part of that conversation did start to focus on energy justice. And so, we need to know this and we need to acknowledge that why in this past year, equity has become the forefront of all of our conversations. We just heard that the Biden administration has announced the goal of delivering 40% of relevant federal investments to these disadvantaged communities. You guys all know how difficult this year has been. It was not normal, but we're here now. And so now it's time for us to do the work, to continue to do our work. And what I'm hoping with myself and all of you, when we talk about energy justice, that we're going to do that work and we're going to get it right. Next slide, please. So what is energy justice? Well, I'll tell you, the definition that I like is this. Energy justice is the goal of achieving equity in both the social and economic participation in the energy system, while at the same time remediating social, economic, and health burdens on those historically harmed by the energy system. And that's a lot. That's a whole heck of a lot that we're trying to do. What it really means is that it's super complicated, but it's not so complicated that it cannot be accomplished. Energy justice aims to make energy more accessible, more affordable, cleaner, and democratically managed for all communities. To really illustrate what this means, perhaps it's easy to start with what energy justice isn't. It is not deciding what the solution is going to be and wedging it in. It is not making decisions for a community without their involvement. It is not making a choice between clean energy or the environment or economics. Energy justice is all of it, ensuring that communities which are already overburdened are full participants in this energy industry. Energy justice, in my way, is a lens in which we look at these problems so that we reduce the energy burden on communities. Now, energy burden is defined as that percentage of household income spent on energy costs. And it's well established that low income and minority households face the highest burdens, having to spend a greater share of their income to keep the lights on. And that's due to systemic inequalities, including that lead to factors like more inefficient housing. I'll give you an example. EIA produces a residential income energy consumption survey every 5 years. The last one completed in 2020 will have data that will likely be released in June of this year. But the 2015 survey showed that 30% of American households have to make a choice at least 1 month a year between paying their electricity bill, buying food, or medicine. 30% of American households have to make that choice at least once a year. 40% of Hispanic households have to make that choice at least once a year. And 50% of African American households have to make that choice at least once a year. And many of those households are making that choice multiple times a year, if not every single month of the year. That's what we're talking about when I'm talking about energy insecurity and energy burden. I am talking about those people who live in those type of circumstances. And these types of energy burdens are not energy justice. Neither is the fact that in this country, Black communities and low-income people face the highest risk from pollution, with their neighborhoods often located the closest to power plants or bisected by freeways. And as the threats of climate change accelerate, we are seeing that these same communities are at the highest risk of experiencing the worst impacts. Take a look at what just happened in Texas. It was a tragedy for the entire region. But what we're seeing is that severe weather hit minority neighborhoods the hardest as they faced the longest blackouts and the fewest resources for getting through the storm and recovering. And by the way, we saw the same type of dynamic in Superstorm Sandy. That is not energy justice. And neither is the fact that in the energy industry, which provides nearly 7 million Americans with good paying jobs, women and minorities are not represented nearly anywhere close to the rate that they need to be for true diversity and inclusion. Inclusion meaning that not only are we hiring people from different backgrounds, but we're promoting them and including them in these important conversations. Again, this lack of representation is not energy justice. And finally, something that I think is incredibly tragic is that here in the United States, one of the richest countries in the world, there are tens of thousands of people who have no access to electricity at all today. Most of these households are on Native American reservations. And again, it's not just heartbreaking, but this is America in the 21st century, and we are not providing the most basic of resources to everyone. None of this is energy justice. In fact, it's many examples of energy injustice. Next slide, please. So when we talk about energy justice, I want us all to be thinking about an energy system where, one, everyone has reliable access to energy and the quality of life that it can provide. Two, energy is affordable for everyone, meaning no one has to sacrifice other essential purchases, food or medicine, just to pay their utility bill. Where three, minorities and women are represented in energy jobs, at least in proportion to their representation in our population. And finally, where everyone has access to clean air, clean water, a healthy environment, and the economic opportunities that our industry provides. But why should these be our end goals? Why should we care about creating a just energy system? Well, for one, because it's just the right thing to do. There are a lot of communities out there that have been historically left out of the benefits that a working energy system should afford them, or worse, communities that have actively been harmed by that system. But also, when we seek equitable outcomes, we help everybody. And if we've learned nothing from what we've seen last year, is that without a focus on equitable outcomes, we're not going to get them. Some people may think that this makes your job harder, but actually, I think doing the work of equity makes your job easier. For example, investing in a low income neighborhood to make its home more efficient doesn't just help those residents, but it helps clean the air for the entire community. And when we bring new voices to the table, everyone benefits from listening to the perspectives they share. A just energy system makes us all stronger. It's how we get it right. Next slide, please. So, what is a just transition? A second conversation I want to raise today related to energy justice is talk about this just transition. It's another term cited a light recently, commonly used as shorthand for as our energy system changes, especially with technologies like renewables and electric vehicles increasing their market share, how do we not leave behind communities that are reliant on the more traditional technologies, like a coal town in Wyoming or an auto factory in Michigan? Now, this is how a just transition is usually thought of as not leaving people behind. And while it's a start, I'd argue that it's not the best way to think about the problem. It should not be about making plans, then making sure that people come along with your plan. It shouldn't be about making the transition just per se, but rather about making the outcome just. And that means we have to understand all the impacts of this transition can have on our jobs, on businesses, and on communities. We need to start with the end in mind and work toward that, not try to fix things as they go. So, what does that look like? It looks like facing difficult questions raised by the fact that so many people face energy injustice in our current system. It means starting from the ground up, from those communities, in making equitable investments. Frankly, that's different than making equal investments. To get to a place of energy justice, you have to recognize that in some communities, we are going to need to invest more. Let's get back to, say, this example of a town in Michigan that's heavily reliant on the auto industry. And what happens to that town's economy when more EVs on the market? And we don't take into consideration all of the impacts. Well, we could say, well, it's okay, because look, there's going to be a net gain in jobs from the transition overall. Perhaps that's true, but maybe those jobs are out with Tesla in California, or maybe those jobs require a completely different skill set than the background of those Michigan workers. A truly just transition needs to look at what energy justice is for that community. It means that we have to take into account what is going to happen with the existing jobs, what happens to that existing workforce, but also what happens to that tax base and the overall health of that community. We have to listen to the needs of the community, and we need to find comprehensive solutions that address both the economic and environmental sides of the equation. In short, we need to meet communities where they are rather than taking a top-down approach, but that's easier said than done. Another example could be our providers around public housing. Building public housing to be energy efficient is a wonderful thing. It reduces energy burdens, it makes homes cleaner and healthier. But quite honestly, when you talk with people who live in public housing, it is possible that energy efficiency may not be at the top of their list. They may have other priorities that will be for the betterment of their quality of life. And it's just a way to illustrate that when you're working with people who are living in a disadvantaged community, there are lots of things going on. And what you want may not necessarily align with what that community thinks they need. We're going to have to take a collaborative community approach. For example, not explain to community why we think energy efficient housing is to their advantage, but work with them to meet their top concerns. It's about listening to each other and honestly creating a trusting relationship. We're going to have to move at the speed of trust. Now, look, I'm really excited that in recent years and months, conversations about energy justice and creating a just transition have come to the forefront of our energy dialogue. But the truth is, talk doesn't always align with reality. Talking about it is absolutely the first step. But sometimes we do take a this too will pass kind of attitude with big problems. Now, I'm not willing to do that. And my team, I'm so lucky to say, at the Alliance isn't willing to do that either. We're going to have to turn that talk into reality. Next slide, please. And so I believe that energy efficiency is the first solution. What can we do now? Well, as I said, I believe that efficiency is first. Start with efficiency first, and I'll tell you why. The idea behind energy efficiency is pretty straightforward. It means doing more while using less. When we make our homes, businesses, appliances, vehicles, factories, what have you, more efficient, we're able to improve our quality of life while using less of our precious energy resources. While this is tied into every aspect of energy justice, efficiency makes energy more affordable. It possibly can make it, it can also possibly make all the difference for a family that's struggling to make ends meet. It can help a business have money to reinvest in their business, a business owner reinvest in his business, to hire more people, maybe even just help a business that's trying to keep its doors open. Efficiency is also one of the largest employers in the entire energy industry. Out of those 7 million US energy jobs I mentioned, more than 2 million of them are in energy efficiency. These are jobs like retrofitting buildings, manufacturing Energy Star appliances, or completing a home energy audit. And the good news is that energy efficiency jobs are available in 99.7% of US counties, positioning it perfectly for creating opportunities that are accessible to everyone as our energy system changes. And efficiency is one of the most effective decarbonization tools available. In fact, the IEA has found that efficiency alone can account for more than 40% of the emission reductions needed to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. To me, all those factors combined really say that efficiency can and should be the first solution that comes to mind for creating a more just energy system. No other energy solution touches so many sides of this problem. Next slide, please. Now, I want to provide you all with some examples of policies and programs that we could be getting in place, because too often we talk about the ideals without getting into the nuts and bolts of what can be done. As I mentioned before, my organization primarily works on federal policy issues, but as you can expect, getting community-based solutions through Capitol Hill doesn't always seem possible. And I know that that is an understatement. But you know what? I think it's more than possible to design federal policies that, rather than taking a top-down approach to the energy transition we know is at hand, really maintain a clear-eyed view of the end goal of energy justice and inspire community revitalization from the bottom up. For example, we at the Alliance are working with Congress right now to create a new program that would provide grants to small businesses to make low and no-cost energy efficiency upgrades, with an emphasis on reaching disadvantaged communities. Part of what we're thinking is part of this Justice 40 initiative that you heard just a little bit before me. I apologize, I'm stumbling here. Funding for this grant program would be delivered through utilities to make use of existing incentives and to speed up delivery and impact by keeping things local. Because when a small business owner is able to improve the efficiency of their business, they free up funds that would have been used on energy bills to be available for giving employees raises, hiring staff, or expanding operations. At the same time, they are reducing carbon emissions. And because more than 80% of efficiency companies have fewer than 20 employees, we're helping to employ that workforce. It's small business helping small business. And it's a great example of what can be done as we talk about a just transition. But let me just share one more thing about this particular bill that we've called the Main Street Efficiency Act. Not only are we saying we need to focus 40% on those disadvantaged communities, those communities that need it most, we are also saying that the businesses who participate in this program should also be minority owned. We should be creating economic opportunity, and we can on all sides with a bill like this. Another policy solution I'm going to share is investing in the efficiency of our public buildings, which has been a priority of President Biden in his clean energy campaign proposal. School buildings are a great example. Last year, a GAO report came out that said that more than half the public school districts in the US need to update or replace multiple building systems or features in their schools. This includes chronic issues like HVAC, insulation, lighting, you name it. And we have all seen over the last several months around this COVID debate about getting students back into school that healthy buildings are incredibly important. And high poverty districts had by far the greatest gaps in funding between required school repairs and the ability to make them. And those of you who were listening to me earlier talk about the connectedness of these issues. High poverty districts also probably have different types of budgetary constraints in terms of the way that they're able to invest in schools. A proposal that we at the Alliance are working on with Congress is to invest in critical public buildings, including schools, hospitals, airports, et cetera, to improve their resilience, while also locking in decades of emissions and cost savings through efficiency upgrades. At scale, this impact could really be extraordinary. For example, energy costs are second only to salary costs at our nation's schools. Imagine that money that you're saving, and imagine if that money was going towards buying books and other educational materials for our children, rather than heating the outside, as my mother would say, floating out of an inefficient window. So again, when we're talking about a just energy transition with the end goal of job creation, a cleaner environment, economic opportunity, and reduce energy burdens for those who need them most, I believe that this is the type of policy that needs to come to mind. And if you're interested in learning more about our work on efficiency policy, I invite you to join us. Come onto our website, asc.org. Reach out to us. We would love to talk to you, but also love to have you as part of our coalition. Next slide. So what can you do? Well, all of you here today, whether you're in government, business, research, or student, or any other field, are clearly interested in and involved in energy issues. And so before I wrap up, I just want to offer you all a reminder that this work is for you too. It is your responsibility as well. We need to recognize that energy injustice is the reality for far too many people and consider what we can do in our roles to change that. The transformation going on in the energy system today is an opportunity for us to change things for the better, but only if we have a firm vision from the start about what true energy justice looks like, and we build to get there, not the other way around. If you are a policymaker, how are you designing policies that overcome the unjust energy burdens facing so many families today? If you're in the energy industry, how are you making diversity, equity, and inclusion a core part of your organization's culture? If you're in technology, how are you making sure that your technology is reaching the people who would benefit from it the most? No matter who you are and what you do, there's a role that you can play in creating a truly just energy transition. And I'm going to ask all of you today to, one, think about what that role is. And secondly, go out and live that role to the fullest extent of your abilities. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Paula, thank you so much for your insightful words. I am, as we wait for questions to come in, I do want to put a reminder for folks to please accept the invitation to REMO, because I want to make sure, because I believe that Paula is going to be joining us at our networking reception this evening, and I want to make sure that you're there to also meet with her. So in thinking about policy and in sort of the new administration, your new role, have you prioritized certain particular policies that would really move this along? I know that you spoke to some of them, but could you sort of put a finer point on those?
Sure. So we have maybe 4 big policy ideas that we're incredibly focused on. The 2 that I mentioned in my talk, Main Street Efficiency Act and Open Back Better, which is also we describe as mission critical. That's the retrofitting of public buildings, are 2 of our priorities. We are also really engaged in transportation issues. We have a 50 by 50 transportation commission that's been around for several years now. And we're really focused on, so how do you, as we're talking about electrification of transportation, we also understand that that leaves a lot of communities out. And so how do you make sure you have adequate public transportation for our communities? How do you deal with the issues around other transportation systems, be that rail, be that ports? But we're just thinking that, transportation is such a big impact in terms of climate that you can't just look at one little piece of it. There are lots of other things that we need to be taking advantage of and thinking about and looping all those things together. And then the 4th thing, or 4 and 5, I'll say. So 4 would be Energy Star, where, Energy Star is one of those low cost things that we can do to get energy efficient appliances in people's home. And we think there should be continued and strengthened investment in Energy Star. And then the tax incentives that are already in our tax code tax code that help home builders and homeowners and others make their homes or their buildings more efficient. So broadly, those are the things that we're focused on at the Alliance.
Thank you for that. I know there are some other questions that have come in. Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
Let's see. So a question came in about the concern of, well, there's a high burden associated with COVID, but then we also have a huge debt coming with energy burden. So how do we balance between those priorities?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Just repeat it for me again, so I make sure I'm clear.
So the exact question was, I'm concerned that at this time with COVID on one side and huge debt on the other, how do we divert resources to DEI? So can it still continue with other priorities in mind?
Yeah, I would say it has to continue with other priorities in mind. Listen, before COVID happened, a lot of organizations were focusing on DEI for several reasons. One, those that are publicly held, we have ESG, environmental, social, and governance. So we have a lot of banking institutions, investment organizations that are asking companies, what are they doing about DEI? And that is not just because it's the right thing to do, although that is part of the reason. The reality is in this country, we also have a demographic shift that is happening. And we are going to be majority minority by 2030, 2040. We already are when you look at students be under the age of 18. And so if we are trying to have long-term sustainable businesses, DEI has to be a part of that planning because that's the makeup of your future workforce. And so I feel like we shouldn't be, one, I don't think focusing on DEI is a diversion. So I'll start, that's just my personal perspective. But I think that if we are not directed at dealing with these problems in these particular disadvantaged communities, it's not going to happen. We've tried the old way where we piecemeal programs together and hope that it all works out. And what we're realizing is it doesn't all work out. And so what gets measured is what gets done. And we need to be focused on these communities. And I believe you could have growth at the same time that you make those focuses.
Thank you very much. The next question is actually about real estate developers. So is your group working with real estate developers? Because sometimes it's easier to start with a private layer than with the government layer, and who owns the property does make a difference.
So I think I don't want to say no because I've been on this job for 3 months. So I'm going to say maybe I think so, and would love to get whoever asked that question, feel free to send me an email, pglover@asc.org, and I can get you more information. I really just do not know. I think it's a great suggestion, but I don't know.
Paula Glover, thank you so much for your time with us today. We certainly appreciate having you here. Your comments are incredibly insightful and give us a lot to think about. So thank you so much. Look forward to future partnership.